The microphone picked up nothing. The sound engineer checked his equipment 3 times. The levels were correct. The sensitivity was maxed. Everything was working perfectly. But when Bruce Lee threw the punch, there was no sound. Not a whoosh. Not a snap. Not even the rustle of fabric. Complete silence. Then the impact. A sharp crack as the training pad flew out of the holder's hands and slammed against the wall 12 feet away. How? The sound engineer asked. Does a punch that powerful make no sound? Bruce Lee smiled. Because the most dangerous strike is the one you never hear coming. This is the story of the silent punch. The technique that baffled scientists. The method that made Bruce Lee's strikes invisible to human reaction. And the physics that nobody understood until decades after his death. Warner Brothers Studios, Burbank, California, February 1973. The production team of Enter the Dragon was facing an impossible problem. They could not record Bruce Lee's punches. Every other actor on set made normal sounds when they moved. The swoosh of an arm, the snap of a kick, the standard sounds that martial arts films depended on. But Bruce Lee was silent. The sound team had been trying for 3 weeks. Different microphones, different positions, different sensitivity settings. Nothing worked. When Bruce punched, the microphone captured only the impact. The strike itself, the movement from start to finish, was acoustically invisible. Robert Klaus, the director, called a meeting. We need to add sound effects in post-production, Klaus said. Foley artists will create the sounds. Standard procedure. Bruce shook his head. No, my strikes do not make sound. If you add sound, you make them fake. You tell the audience that what they are seeing is not real. But the audience expects sound, the sound engineer argued. Every martial arts film has the swoosh, the snap, the impact sounds. Without them, the fights will feel empty. Bruce considered this. Play me a recording, he said. Play me what you captured when I threw that punch at full speed. The sound engineer cued the tape. The room listened. Silence. Complete silence. Then a sharp crack of impact. That is 2 sounds, Bruce said. Silence and impact. That is the truth of my technique. That is what a real strike sounds like. He paused. If you add fake sounds between them, you destroy the truth. And the truth is more powerful than any sound effect. The room was quiet. Finally, Klaus spoke. Explain it to me. Why do your punches make no sound? Every other martial artist we have filmed makes sound. What are you doing differently? Bruce stood up. Let me show you. He walked to the center of the room. Asked the sound engineer to start recording. First, Bruce said, I will throw a punch the way most martial artists throw punches. He chambered his fist at his hip, traditional karate style. Then he punched. The microphone captured everything. The rustle of his shirt as his arm moved. The slight whoosh of air displacement. The snap of his arm extending. Clear, recordable sounds. Now, Bruce said, I will throw the same punch my way. He reset his position. This time, his hands were already up. No chamber. No preparación. He punched. The microphone captured nothing. Then the impact sound as his fist stopped against the training pad. The sound engineer stared at his equipment in disbelief. That is impossible, he said. You moved. Air was displaced. There has to be sound. Bruce shook his head. There is sound, but it is below the threshold of human hearing. Below the threshold of your equipment. The sound exists, but it is too fast and too small to register. How? Bruce walked back to the center of the room. Let me explain what most people get wrong about striking. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Bruce Lee's explanation of the silent punch would take 3 hours that day. What he revealed would challenge everything the film industry understood about martial arts. And it began with a simple question. What creates sound when you move? The sound engineer answered first. Friction, air displacement, the movement of fabric, the acceleration and deceleration of mass. Correct, Bruce said. Sound is created by disturbance. When you move, you disturb the air. You disturb your clothing. You disturb the space around you. That disturbance creates waves. Those waves are sound. He paused. So how do you eliminate sound? Eliminate disturbance, the engineer said. Exactly. But here's the problem. You cannot eliminate movement. A punch requires movement. The fist must travel from one point to another. That travel disturbs air. That disturbance should create sound. So how do you do it? Bruce smiled. By changing what creates the movement. He walked to a whiteboard in the corner of the room, drew a simple diagram. Most punches, he said, drawing a straight line, accelerate and decelerate like this. He drew a curve above the line, a bell curve, rising, peaking, falling. The fist starts slow. It accelerates to maximum speed in the middle of the movement. Then it decelerates as it approaches the target. The sound engineer nodded. He understood basic physics. This acceleration pattern, Bruce continued, creates sound at multiple points. The initial acceleration disturbs air. The sustained speed creates friction. The deceleration disturbs air again. 3 opportunities for sound. He drew another diagram beside the first. My punch, he said, does not follow this pattern. He drew a different curve, almost flat at the beginning, then a sudden vertical spike at the end. I do not accelerate gradually. I remain almost still until the final instant. Then I explode. He tapped the spike on his diagram. All my acceleration happens here, in this tiny fraction of a second. The movement is so fast that the air does not have time to compress properly. The fabric does not have time to rustle. The disturbance is over before sound waves can form. The room was silent, processing this. Think of it like a whip, Bruce said. When you crack a whip, the tip moves faster than the speed of sound. That is why it makes a crack, not a whoosh. The air cannot get out of the way in time. He held up his fist. My punch is similar, not supersonic, but close enough that the air displacement happens too fast to create audible sound. By the time the sound waves would form, the punch is already finished. Klaus leaned forward. But we see the punch. We see your arm move. If it were that fast, would not it be a blur? Bruce shook his head. You see the beginning and the end. You see my hand here, then you see it here. Your brain fills in the middle. It assumes movement. But the actual movement, the acceleration phase, is invisible to human perception. He demonstrated. He stood with his fist at his chest. Then his fist was extended. No visible movement in between. Just position A, then position B. The room gasped. That is a trick, someone said. Camera trick. Bruce laughed. No camera. No trick. Just speed that your eyes cannot track. He did it again. Fist to chest. Fist extended. No transition. Then he did it in slow motion, exaggerating the movement so they could see it. Watch carefully, he said. Watch where the acceleration happens. His fist stayed at his chest. Still, motionless. Then exploded forward. A blur of movement that ended with his arm fully extended. All the speed is in the final 2 inches, he explained. The first 10 inches are preparation. Positioning. The last 2 inches are the strike. 2 inches, the sound engineer repeated. Yes. The same principle as the 1-inch punch, but applied to a full strike. The power does not come from distance. It comes from acceleration. And when acceleration is concentrated into a small enough space, it happens faster than sound can form. The physics of the silent punch would not be fully understood for decades. In 2015, researchers at Stanford University conducted a biomechanical analysis of Bruce Lee's striking technique using historical footage and motion capture recreations. Their findings confirmed what Bruce had explained in that production meeting 40 years earlier. Bruce Lee's punches exhibited a unique acceleration profile. Unlike traditional martial artists, who accelerated gradually throughout the movement, Bruce remained relatively still for approximately 85% of the punch duration. Then, in the final 15%, he accelerated explosively. This concentration of acceleration resulted in peak velocities that exceeded what gradual acceleration could achieve. The Stanford team measured simulated speeds of over 44 miles per hour in punches that traveled less than 12 inches. More significantly, the rapid acceleration created minimal air disturbance during the early phases of the movement. The air compression that creates audible sound simply did not have time to develop before the punch was complete. The silent punch was not a myth. It was physics, but the physics only explained part of the story. The real question was, how did Bruce Lee train himself to move this way? The answer lay in a training method that Bruce developed over 15 years. He called it zero to maximum. The principle was simple. Most people, when they want to move fast, start fast. They accelerate immediately. This creates early sound, early air disturbance, early warning for the opponent. Bruce trained the opposite. He would hold a position of absolute stillness, complete relaxation, no tension in any muscle. Then, without any warning movement, he would explode. The training was brutal. Dan Inosanto described it in detail. Bruce would stand in front of a heavy bag for hours, he recalled. Not hitting it, just standing, completely still. Then, without any indication, he would strike. If I blinked, I missed it. If I looked away for a second, I missed it. He would stand there, statue still, and then the bag would fly back with no visible transition. The training required eliminating what Bruce called telegraph movements. Telegraph movements are the tiny preparatory actions that signal an attack. The tensing of a shoulder, the shifting of weight, the cocking of a hip, the drawing of a breath. Most people, even trained fighters, have dozens of telegraph movements. They cannot strike without first preparing to strike. And that preparation, however subtle, creates sound and visibility. Bruce eliminated them all. He trained himself to strike from absolute relaxation. No preparación, no warning, no telegraph. The result was a punch that seemed to teleport from start to finish, and a punch that made no sound. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. The implications of the silent punch extended far beyond film production. In combat, sound provides critical information to the defender. The rustle of clothing signals movement. The whoosh of air signals an incoming strike. The grunt of exertion signals power. Most fighters rely on these sounds unconsciously. Their defensive reactions are triggered not just by what they see, but by what they hear. Bruce Lee's silent punch eliminated this entire channel of information. Opponents facing Bruce could not hear his attacks coming. They had only visual information. And given the speed of his strikes, visual information often arrived too late. Joe Louis, the world kickboxing champion who trained with Bruce, described the experience. Fighting Bruce was like fighting a ghost, Louis said. You cannot hear him move. You cannot see him move. You would be looking right at him, and suddenly his fist was touching your face. No warning, no sound, nothing. Louis was one of the best fighters in the world. He had faced dozens of elite competitors. None of them fought like Bruce Lee. The silence was the worst part, Louis admitted. I have been hit by hard punchers. I know what that feels like. But with Bruce, you did not even know you were being hit until it was over. There was no build-up, no anticipation, just impact. Gene LeBell, the legendary grappler, had a similar experience. I tried to grab Bruce during a sparring session, LeBell recalled. I'm a grappler. I wait for the opponent to move, then I react. But Bruce did not move. Not in any way I could detect. He was standing there, then he was hitting me, then he was standing there again. No transition, no sound. It was unnerving. LeBell had trained with hundreds of martial artists over his career. He had never encountered anything like Bruce Lee's silent technique. It violated everything I understood about combat, LeBell said. Movement creates sound. Effort creates warning. Attack creates opportunity. Bruce seemed to operate outside these rules. He attacked without movement. He struck without effort. He hit without warning. The film industry eventually adapted to Bruce Lee's silence. For Enter the Dragon, the sound team created a unique approach. Instead of adding traditional swoosh sounds to Bruce's movements, they emphasized the impact sounds. Every strike landed with exaggerated force. The silence before became a feature, not a bug. The effect was revolutionary. Audiences unconsciously noticed that something was different about Bruce Lee's fighting. They could not articulate what, but they felt it. The silence created tension. The sudden impacts created shock. The combination was more visceral than any traditional martial arts sound design. Other films tried to replicate the effect, but most failed. They added too much silence, making the fights feel empty. Or they added too much impact, making the strikes seem cartoon-like. Only Bruce Lee's genuine technique achieved the perfect balance. Because only Bruce Lee's technique was real. The physics of the silent punch raised another question. If Bruce Lee's strikes were fast enough to be nearly silent, how did they generate such devastating power? Traditional physics suggests a trade-off between speed and power. To move faster, you must reduce mass. To hit harder, you must increase mass. The two goals seem incompatible. Bruce Lee resolved this paradox through a principle he called heavy speed. Most people, he explained, think of speed and power as separate qualities. Fast and light, slow and heavy. They train one or the other. He shook his head. This is wrong. Speed and power are the same thing. Power is mass times acceleration. If you can accelerate a small mass fast enough, it becomes heavy. A bullet weighs almost nothing. But accelerated to 1,700 miles per hour, it becomes devastating. He demonstrated on a training pad. First, he threw a slow, heavy punch, traditional karate style. The pad absorbed the impact, moving back slightly. That punch had power, he said, but it was slow. The pad had time to absorb the force. The energy distributed across the entire impact. Then he threw his silent punch. The pad exploded backward. The holder stumbled. The impact sounded like a gunshot. Same mass, Bruce said, pointing at his fist. Same fist, same arm, but different acceleration. The second punch was faster. So fast that the pad could not absorb the force. The energy had nowhere to distribute. It all transferred in a single instant. He held up his fist again. This is heavy speed. Making something light become heavy through acceleration. Making something small become devastating through velocity. The training for heavy speed was related to the zero to maximum principle, but with an additional element. Bruce trained what he called following through emptiness. Most punchers, even fast ones, begin to decelerate before impact. They pull back slightly, either consciously or unconsciously. This deceleration reduces power. Bruce trained himself to accelerate through the target. Not to the target, through it. I do not aim at your face, he explained. I aim at a point 6 inches behind your face. My fist is still accelerating when it reaches you. It has not begun to slow down. All that acceleration transfers directly into the target. The effect was multiplication. A normal punch delivers force equal to mass times the velocity at impact. But if velocity is still increasing at impact, if acceleration is still happening, the force multiplies. Bruce's silent punch was not just fast. It was accelerating at the moment of impact, getting faster even as it landed. The physics were extreme. The training was extreme. The results were extreme. The sound engineer at Warner Brothers eventually solved the recording problem in an unexpected way. He placed microphones not in front of Bruce, but behind him. What he captured was fascinating. The microphone picked up a faint sound. Not a whoosh, not a snap, something else. A slight vacuum effect. When Bruce threw his silent punch, the speed was so extreme that he created a momentary low-pressure zone behind his arm. Air rushed in to fill the void. That rush of air, barely audible, was the only sound his technique created. The sound engineer amplified this recording and played it for the production team. That, Bruce said, smiling, is the sound of absence. The sound of air trying to fill the space where my arm used to be. Klaus shook his head in amazement. We have been trying to record your punch from the front. We should have been recording the vacuum you leave behind. The discovery led to a unique sound design choice. In certain scenes of Enter the Dragon, the sound team used this reversed audio. The vacuum sound, the rush of air filling empty space. Most audiences never consciously noticed, but subconsciously, they registered that something was different. Something was wrong. Something was dangerous. The silent punch had found its voice. Not the sound of movement, the sound of absence. Bruce Lee died 5 months after that production meeting. He never saw the final cut of Enter the Dragon. Never heard how the sound team had solved the problem. Never knew that his silent technique would be studied by scientists for decades. But the legacy of the silent punch lives on. Modern martial artists train the zero to maximum principle. Sports scientists study the concentration of acceleration. Film sound designers reference the vacuum effect. And everyone who watches Bruce Lee's fights notices, even if they cannot articulate it, that something is different. Something is missing. Something that should be there is absent. Sound. The sound of a punch that never existed. Because Bruce Lee understood something that most people never grasp. The most dangerous strike is not the one that makes the most noise. It is the one that makes no noise at all. The one you never hear coming. The one that arrives before your brain can process that it exists. The silent punch. The technique that baffled scientists. The method that made Bruce Lee's strikes invisible to human reaction. And the truth that changed martial arts forever. Real power does not announce itself. Real speed does not disturb the air. Real danger arrives in silence. Bruce Lee knew this. And now, so do you.